Welcome to the Bootstrap Founder. Today, I'm talking to Moritz Dausinger, a serial indie hacker with several exits under his belt. Moritz most recently pivoted his software business Refiner after 18 months of trying to figure out a way forward. Well, now he's found it. We will chat about figuring out how to structure sales, how and who to hire, and if he really wants to sell this business again, for a third time. And before we get to our conversation about all of this, let me introduce the sponsor of today's episode. Now imagine this. You're a founder who's built a solid SaaS product. You acquired customers and you're generating consistent monthly revenue. The problem is you're not growing for whatever reason, lack of focus, lack of skill, or just plain lack of interest, and you feel stuck. What should you do? Well, the story that I would like to hear is that you buckled down and somehow reignited the fire, getting past yourself and the cliches, and you started working on your business rather than just in the business. You start building an audience, and you move out of your comfort zone, and you do sales and marketing and all the things you don't like doing. And in 6 months, you've tripled your revenue. The reality isn't that simple. Situations may be different for every founder facing this particular crossroad. And too many times the story ends up being one of inaction and stagnation until your business becomes less valuable or worse, worthless. If you find yourself here, or your story is likely headed down a similar road, I offer you a third option. Consider selling your business on acquire.com. Capitalizing on the value of your time is a smart move. Acquire.com is free to list, and they've helped hundreds of founders already. Go to acquire.com and see if this is for you, if this is the right option for you at this time. All right, here is Moritz Dausinger. Moritz, I really have to thank you, not just for being on this podcast today, but for having been on podcasts in the past. In August of 2017, and this is 6 years ago, which is crazy. You went on the Indie Hackers podcast, and that was episode 24. It was barely a couple months old at that time. You talked about building and selling mail parser, and I remember this podcast episode so vividly. I have like a visual memory of this. I was traveling through Berlin, just coming home from work in the S-Bahn right there. And I heard you mention that you sold your business to a private equity company. And it blew my mind that day. I just didn't know. I didn't know that was possible. And you also mentioned the name of that company, which is something I will never forget because we ended up selling our SaaS business to the same private equity company 2 years later. And in a way, that makes you responsible for our exit. So I just wanted to extend a very big thank you to you and just point out how powerful it can be to share your story in public like you did on that podcast. So I'm really, really glad you're here today as well. So thank you so much for that.
Man, you can't imagine how happy I am to hearing this. And now look at us, 6 years later? 7 years later?
Right? So yeah, almost 7. Yes.
And I remember when I got asked to speak on the Indie Hackers podcast, I was hesitating. It was quite new. I knew the website, but it was kind of a niche experience back then, this whole Indie Hackers thing. And luckily I did. I think there's so many, also from my career and my story coming afterward, so many good things came from this one podcast, which was, I think, actually my first one ever.
Nice.
So, lucky me.
Yeah,
stumbled into the right thing, right?
That's right. That's a great start to start podcasting, probably in what is still the best podcast in the space, right? Or at least the most renowned podcast that I could think of when I think about indie hacking. Yeah. So are you still an indie hacker? Do you still consider yourself an indie hacker?
Oh, well. I think I stopped putting myself a label on quite a long time ago.
Okay.
Because it really depends with who I'm talking to. Like, for example, if I would talk to my parents, I would say I'm a Mittelstand IT Unternehmen, like a German, small business IT company. So I'm not a startup. I'm not I would say it's a small IT company. We are several people, so I'm not really an indie hacker, but I'm the solo founder. At the same time, it's mostly self-financed. So you could say I'm the indie hacker. You could also say I'm just a 40-something guy who has an IT company and building software, right?
Yeah, I guess that's what most Germans would be much more easily kind of attracted to as a concept. They would understand, like, the middle Mittelstand. That's what we call it, right? The
Yeah,
middle class small business thing.
yeah,
That is something relatable to most people. It is interesting that you mentioned this. Like, you said you're having a team, so you're not an indie hacker anymore. That I mean, that's not exactly what you said, but it is kind of a sentiment that once you grow your business to a certain size, it feels less indie, less independent. It still might be financially, right? You might still have most of your funds coming actually from your customers, but there is some dependency in the business, either for your team members, so they have a job, like a stable income, or to customers who really rely on you. Now, there is a dependency in there. That is something that I don't hear many people talk about. Like, what that dependency, that newfound dependency in a previously independent business is. Let's maybe talk about what you're currently building, or maybe yeah, okay, let's start with that, because we can talk about the things you built in the past afterwards. We don't need to be chronologically correct, but you're currently working on Refiner, and I think Refiner has an amazing, long, and I guess arduous and stressful story, and I would like to hear about it.
yeah.
How did that go? Like, after selling your first two businesses, you started Refiner. What made you jump into that again?
Yeah, so when I sold my last company, Dog Parser, I had an agreement with the buyer where I would stay on for a couple of, like, what was 1.5 years actually, and I would gradually transition out of the company. So his interest was basically, as long as things are going well, I'm going to work less and less. Fine for me. However, back then, having a wife, having kids means you are not free to go anywhere in the world. So you kind of stuck where you are in the office still. And so I thought, why not just build the next one, right? I mean, I need to do something. And so when I was running Dog Parser, I had this need to qualify my signups. Like, they would create an account. I didn't want to have too many questions while they are creating their accounts. I wanted them to experience the software right away. But I still had some questions I would like have answered. And so what I did, I was displaying an in-app survey 5 minutes after they created an account, asking two simple questions. Just for context, like Dog Parsers are document processing software. So I was asking the question, how many documents are you processing per month? What type of documents do you want to process? And having the answer of those to those two questions allowed me, first of all, making some kind of Excel and charts and whatever to figure out who my customers are. And secondly, I could identify bigger accounts. I could say, oh, this one looks really interesting. I want to talk with this guy. I want to make sure that they are having a good experience. And so it worked really well. I liked the idea. I didn't find the product doing that. So back then I was basically hard coding all this. And so I thought this would be my next venture. I started coding this very simple idea. And well, 1.5 years later, I found myself with an enormously complex, enterprisey kind of lead qualification solution nobody was asking for. Literally, nobody was asking for.
Wow.
So even though I created a couple of companies before, I did a pretty classic beginner mistake. And the issue there was I built first of all, a software nobody was asking for. Secondly, a software where you would need to have some kind of enterprise sales process, something I really don't like doing, and so on and so on. So I felt like, okay, I'm kind of stuck somewhere. Let's go back. Let's do a kind of pivot and go back to this initial simple idea of showing surveys inside an app. And this is what basically Refiner is today. So I threw away like 90% of the code, launched 1 week before lockdown, COVID lockdown in France. Perfect timing. But well, it gave me some time to, like, I don't know, like, I think this whole first COVID months, it was good that the software was quiet. There was not much going on. So I mean, there were other stuff to take care of, for example, the kids. And then after, in total, I would say 2 years after starting this new project, I was at the point where I had a significant MRR of, I don't know, that was like 1 or 2,000 $1,000 per month, which was for me the sign. Okay, I finally, after 2 years, I did it. I had
Yeah.
built another software which was kind of working well. Yeah, that's the beginning of this refiner story. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing this. Thanks also for just being honest, both to yourself and to me and everybody listening about, like even if you did a couple things before and you were successful, doesn't mean you cannot fall in the same traps again, right? Do make the same mistakes. And it's probably, I don't know, maybe I just want to ask you this. Did you feel like you knew better, after having built two businesses, that you knew exactly what your customers need and then you build it? Was that it? Some kind of hubris, some kind of, oh yeah, I know better than everybody else?
Yeah, kind of. So like I mean, at that time, Doc Parser was the third product I had built and which became big. And so I was like, oh, okay, I found my model. I like building software. I like the early days. So I'm just going to continue building one project after the other, SaaS product, B2B SaaS product, because I figured it all out. I know it all. And yeah, no, I think what helps you, what like the experience I have right now definitely helps in the day-to-day operations. It helps with a lot of things. I wouldn't neglect it, but it doesn't prevent you from making stupid mistakes. It doesn't prevent you from not finding the MVP you're looking for. And it really reminded me that going from zero to something is just so hard, and you need to have luck, and you need to have good timing, and you need to have a lot of things checked to be there. Once you have something in your hand, which I mentioned before, like $1,000 to $2,000 MRR, then I think it's much more about execution. But before that, it's some kind of like magic where you,
Yeah.
yeah, well, everybody does it different, but yeah.
Yeah. That's an interesting point. Once you have something, not only is it just about execution at that point, but it's never just about anything, right? Entrepreneurship is everything at the same time. But if you have something, not only can you actually put more energy into what you know works, you can also show it to other people and make other people interested. And I think you did that, right? Because for your first products, you only really put your own money into this. You just used your own funds and that was it. But for Refiner, you went a different route. Do you want to explain a little bit what you did once you reached that point in MRR?
Yes. Yeah, just to follow up on this, the first one, like I feel like once you have something, then that also means, yeah, as you mentioned, you can show it to somebody, and you have most importantly customers.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
once you have 10 customers or 50 customers, I feel like the job changes. The job is then to listen to what they're saying, having your own vision as well, and trying to match those two things. And so I'm definitely not the guy saying whatever the customer says, I'm going to implement it. It's more like whatever they say and it fits my product strategy. It's maybe already on my to-do list. Then I'm doing it, right? So this is why I think it's getting not easier, but different once you have 10 or let's say 50 customers. And yeah, to follow up on your point about what I did once I went to the 1 to 2K MRR, at that time, I already had like nearly 2 years of own money spending and no salary put into this company. And I felt like I have now two choices. Either I do that again, like another year without a salary, or maybe 2 years without a salary, or maybe I can get a little bit of extra outside funding inside this company. And, like the reason why I never raised before was because I didn't really like the venture capital path you are set on once you raise with a VC, which means seed round and Series A, Series B, and you basically are promising everybody, I'm going to build a really, really big company. And good for people who want to do that. I didn't want to do that. So I never actually considered the VC path something which would fit to me. But luckily, during the last years, there were a couple of funds coming up which are, they call themselves bootstrapper friendly. So you can get an investment. They definitely are fun. So they want to have a return on their investment, but they're not necessarily setting you up on the path of a typical VC startup. And so that made it compatible to me. And so I raised some money with Calm Company Fund. And I actually really, I can full-heartedly say I don't regret it, because it allowed me to just really accelerate a little bit, like hiring freelancers for marketing, and also a developer freelancer, and just go faster. And with not many strings attached. There are for sure strings attached. You are giving away a part of your company, right? And the moment you want to sell your company, it's also, you need to give money back to them. So you are kind of signing up that this is becoming a bigger thing than just like a project you would sell for, let's say, 50 or 100K on a microacquire. You're kind of signing up that you want to build a bigger thing. That's the strings attached to it. But apart from that, I was really quite happy about that decision.
Yeah.
Also because, as I mentioned before, I already put in a lot of own money, and I felt like if I continue doing that, it's just becoming more and more difficult to make really objective decisions, because it's still a business, right? It's not it's a business.
That's what I was. That's what I'm super interested in, because you're saying like, with that money you can make objective decisions, and without it they would have been more, I don't know, fear driven, I guess. Which is interesting, because most people, whenever they talk about raising money, they say, well, now I need to make different decisions for my investors, right? But that's where the bootstrapper compatibility comes in. Can you kind of explain like that the kind of decisions that you didn't want to make, like the kind of all your money is in there and now I need to, protect it? What was was driving you at that point?
Yeah, it was more like putting too much of my own wealth into one project, and also, like I think it's really interesting to ask the question: when are you raising?
Yeah.
What wouldn't work for me, for example, is raise money on an idea, because then I would be super nervous. Like, oh man, this guy just gave me money, and now I really need to deliver and need to build something that is working. The moment I raised money from Tyler from Calm Company Fund, there was already a software product which was working, right? It was not profitable, but it was working. And there I was confident enough, given my previous experiences with in the SaaS space, that I thought, okay, if I can bring it to 2K MRR, I'm probably going to be able to bring it to 20 or more. And so, yeah, that gave me confidence to say from now on, I can do that, but I prefer doing it with outside money than my own money. So
okay, that is exactly what I love about this bootstrapper compatible model. Like, first off, they are compatible in terms of they don't really interfere with your decision making, which is exactly what you need at that point, right? As a solo founder or as an indie founder, you want to make your independent choices. That's what you signed up for on the whole journey. That's what you want. And they only really take you on if you've proven that the thing you're doing works, right? Like if you look at Tiny Seed, or if you look at the Calm Company Fund, or whatever other players in the field exist, they all want you to prove that you can have customers. They need you to already have customers before they give you money, which is also complete opposite of the VC idea. They want you to just, have a really disruptive idea and maybe some kind of semblance of a product, if at all. Like some products don't even exist but are marketed, in the VC space. Not that there's anything wrong with trying to disrupt the world. It's also interesting, right, as a business approach. But I think in terms of what we are doing as people who want to build, and I mean this in the best sense of the word, a lifestyle business, a business that allows us to live the way we want to live, having somebody who can support us like that is great. And I have to mention it. I have a podcast with Tyler where we are building stuff together. So obviously I'm not going to badmouth the idea of the Com Company Fund here. Also being an investor in the fund and also knowing that both you and me and Tyler, we all sold our businesses to the same private equity company. It's a big family, right? Like, and
Yeah.
that's what I kind of love about the fund. Like it was initially called Earnest Capital when he started, and then he renamed it to the Com Company Fund, which I think is a much better name. It comes from a place where people really understand what the kind of business that we want to build is about, right? Both Tyler and the mentors and the investors in the fund, we all are effectively solopreneur or really small indie business owners, or have been, because we sold our businesses, right? So we know exactly what this field is about. And I'm really happy you got some funding for Refiner, because apparently it helped you pretty well, right? Like
It did.
Refiner is looking pretty good.
It did. And then, like, I think, I can't really remember I think you can put it like that. Like, it's really about math. The Calm Company Fund or similar funds assume that 8 out of 10 investments will work out.
Yeah.
And which is the opposite to the VC model, where it's basically 2 out of 10 will work out and
Yeah, that's
the
right.
rest maybe not. And I'm not saying this one is better, this one is better. I can just say this one is more compatible with me as Moritz, as somebody who likes building software products and likes organizing my days the way I want to. And so, yeah, I'm happy that I took that. And like really, what it really did is that I switched a little bit my mindset. I was hiring, was able to hire freelancers in advance. Like, like you're not profitable yet, but you can burn more money. That's this typical sweet poison all the startups have, that they can just burn money. And I felt it. It's really sweet. It's really
Mm-hmm.
good. But yeah, after half a year or 1 year, you're like, oh, wow, I already spent half of it or what? And so you need to be careful with it. But it did really help in terms of product development and marketing, because SEO, like content, is one of the big drivers for a refiner, and it's a long-term game. Like you need to invest over a long time period of time. It's not something where you can just put down like 500 euros and the next week you're going to see results. You need to start early, and you need to do it good, and it will cost some money. And a lot of this money went into that. And so, yeah, that wouldn't have happened without the investment. Yeah.
Well, that's good to know. I'm reminded, as you're talking about like who you hired and the freelancers that are working for you, I reminded a talk that Rob Walling was just giving at MicroConf in Denver a couple months ago. He talked about the first hires that every B2B SaaS business should be doing. And I do wonder, in your particular case, what is the order of people that you hired? In the sense of that you hired for part-time or for full-time or even just projects, what order of jobs did you need to hire out?
Yeah. So I don't want to make a rule out of that, and I exploring things as I go, but I can just say what I did. For the early iteration of the early product, I hired a website designer to make it look good, so that I have a nice website. I did the product myself entirely, so I was lucky enough that I could code and build some kind of UI, which is not too crazy ugly. But you need to see that my product has a visual part of it. It's the surveys, and these ones were also designed by a designer. So I was able to get a good-looking product, which was kind of important for my business. Next thing was marketing, like as I said, the SEO person. It's Pavel from Smashing Copy, which I can really recommend.
That's cool.
And after that, it was a developer, another marketing person. Today, we're having also the mobile survey. So I have 2 mobile developers, a salesperson in Paris. She's doing basically following up and building up a process around bigger customers, so that because they have special needs to get onboarded. and who else? That's about it. Yeah, I think,
Wow.
yeah.
And just that list alone raises so many questions for me, but I'm trying to constrain myself to one at a time. First one, how was it hard to hire developers for you? Because I felt that so strongly to hire somebody that was supposed to do my work as good as I did it. How
Mm,
was that for you?
yeah. No, like really, really difficult when you're a technical founder. And so I was super lucky to find Ben. He's also active on Twitter. Digital Trouble is his handle. Um, he was, or he is a senior person I can trust. Nevertheless, you need to do a lot of specs. You need to really write it down in the detail because nobody knows your product better than you do. And secondly, there are parts on the product I think are good for outsourcing. And then there are other parts where I'm basically like, okay, no, I'm the best fit for this particular part of the product. If one day I'm in the position to hire a full-time employee who's just doing that, for sure he's going to take over. But for right now, these are the parts I'm handling, and these are parts. For example, in our case, Ben coded the entire dashboard section where you could build your own custom reporting dashboards, like adding a chart and resizing and removing. It was really a nice project apart, which didn't interfere with all the other rest of the software. So that was basically my approach. That I would say, no, I can't go outsource all of it, but there are definitely things I can outsource. And even then, if you have a really good person, it's so difficult to have the coding standards right to make it so that for me, it's really important that the code base is kind of uniform, like if one day somebody else gonna take over, they will find their way because everything is done in the same way, which I value more than the perfect way. It might not be perfect, but at least it's the same way everywhere. So there's a system to it. And all this kind of stuff is really getting more and more difficult, the more people you're putting on the project. And yeah, so that's the answer of your first question. I think some things you can outsource, some things I'm not eager to.
Man, that's a great answer. Like to know what you need to still do, and to also let go of the things that I bet you could do, right? Because you have to until you hire somebody for it. So how much of your day do you still spend coding, like compared to all the other things you have to do as a founder?
Right now, close to zero.
Okay.
Because and I'm saying this with a sad face for those who are not watching but listening. No, I really like coding. But I know that for the business, I'm spending a lot of time onboarding new customers. I'm spending a lot of time doing admin stuff like paying bills and paying contractors, paying moving money around, and like, for example, also with the bigger accounts, there's also always legal questions, and there's just so much stuff to do. So no, unfortunately, I'm not coding much these days. And one of the next things on my list would be also to hire somebody for exactly this, the technical support, I call it. Like, it's not just support in the way of, oh, where do I change my password? It's more like a customer success person who really takes the new customer by their hand and makes sure that they get the most out of the solution. And I think this will free up a lot of time once I find the right person to do so. Because right now it's really like less fun than before. Let's say like this. Before there was a lot of coding and new features and whatever, and right now it's more like this, showing up every day and getting the stuff moving.
Yeah.
But it's part of the game, right? I mean,
Yeah. I mean, can't run a business without operations, right? You still need to make things happen. But I was talking to Tyler about this on our podcast. He was kind of bringing it up because he has been talking to a lot of founders, obviously in the fund, and he heard from a lot of them that they just want to be contributors to their own projects. They still want to contribute. They want to be an individual contributor to the code base, to the actual product, and often they can't really find it. So find the time to do it because there's so much else to do. So what you're doing right now, I think, is very important to even be aware of, that just because the business necessitates all this extra work, doesn't mean that you cannot find somebody to do it for you, right? You are not the only person who can. So I'm glad you're already thinking through how you can get that work offloaded to somebody else so you can be best at what you're at, which seems to be coding at least.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's a real issue, and probably it's so rare that you find somebody who is good in the beginning of building a company where you need to contribute, and then he kind of switches to like the brothers of Stripe.
Yeah.
They are coders, and then they switched at a certain point into conquering the world. Like, I mean, you don't do that by continuing coding, I guess. You do that by hiring the right people, having the right strategy, and so on. And honestly, it's I maybe sounds a little bit self-limiting, but I'm kind of feeling good in this early stage world where I'm still contributing a lot, and I'm curious how far I'm going to go this time with Refiner. But it's not something I'm feeling pulled towards to say, oh, I really want to be managing 100 people in 2 years. It's really not something I'm having in my head when I'm waking up in the morning. It's more like, oh, I think we should probably develop this and that because I feel like that would be a good fit for the product. I'm more in this world still. Again, maybe we talk in 5 years and then I'm telling you a different story. But right now, today, I'm more in this mindset that I am enjoying building products and companies. And let's see how big we are growing. But let's see about that.
It does remind me not about like 5 years in the future, because who knows what's going to happen then, but it does remind me of 5 years in the past when I was listening to you on the 24th episode of Indie Hackers. And, you know, the mentality you had back then kind of sounds like the mentality you have today. You want to build interesting stuff and you want to grow it to a point where you still enjoy building it. Right. So maybe let's talk about mail parser and doc parser. Like you did sell them at some point. You did get acquired. I do wonder why that is, because, you know, like we all either we want to sell or we want to build something for life. Can you explain to me maybe like the process of how you figured out that you can and wanted to sell a business in the first place?
Yeah. So when I started building Mayparser, it was meant to be a fun side project where I'm actually really not having any ambition there. I was working for a startup studio in Paris, a very well-known startup studio, really having the best job in the world. It's called eFounders. It's really where everybody wants to work, and I was able to work there, so I had a great job there. And yeah, but I still built this software, and then it kind of took its own life. And then there was this moment where I had 5K MRR on the side project and pretty much the same in the salary. And I needed to decide, where is this going? And I decided I want to give it a try. I want to see how far I can go. And at that time, I also read a website on a website about FE International, which was a business broker. And I was like, what? Does this exist? A business broker? like a real estate broker, but somebody who's just selling online estates. And I was like super fascinated by that. And then somehow I saw, okay, right, if you bring it to this kind of MR, you can sell it for this much money. And then, well, it became interesting as an idea. And then, by discovering this whole world, this idea was a little bit set in my head to say, okay, maybe I can bring it to a point where I can sell it. And, like people are always referring to this life-changing money or whatever. But yeah, sorry to say it, but it was kind of true. It allowed us to do a big down payment for an apartment and secure myself as a entrepreneur in the way of like having first of all more self-confidence in that I'm like, okay, apparently what I'm doing it correctly. Secondly, most of my apartment in one of the most expensive cities in Europe is already paid. That's good. And if I can do it once, maybe I can do it twice. So like, it was really, it was not in the sense of now I'm buying big watches and cars and whatever. Not at all. It was just like giving me some kind of peace of mind and security in life. And yeah, so that was really attractive as an idea. And that's why I sold Mail Parser. And at the same time, back then I had created Dog Parser, which was kind of a sister product. And Kevin, the buyer of Mail Parser, from Swift Capital back then, agreed that I could continue building up Dog Parser and selling May Parser to him. And it was basically a win-win situation, because what I like to do is building up stuff, and what he likes to do is buying stuff that is already big. And so I told him, let's do it. So I continue working on Dog Parser, and once I feel it's time is ready, and we both agreed that the time is ready, he would have the right of first refusal. So he is not obliged to buy it, but he can buy it. And this is how it happened. And so these two were basically, well, two different products, two different adventures, but one story, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. It's nice to build that connection to the thing you were just saying with Kevin. That is important, right? Because in this space, even though there's a lot of competition among funds and private equity companies, it is nice to know somebody that you can trust. I very, very fondly remember our first interaction, like around the time that we were trying to sell Feedback Panda, our business, and also we're looking at SureSwift. And I did a lot of outreach to people like you and Tyler, people who had sold their businesses before, just to make sure that there's a relationship that I can actually trust with these people. Because you said it, like life-changing amounts of money. And that is scary, right? It's scary to deal with something that is so valuable, your thing. They even get to look into it. They look into your P&L, they look into your, all your documents, your cash flow, and maybe even your database or something, right? You have to be really protective. So knowing that you already have somebody you can trust and sell this next thing to probably gave you a very different, or at least a more secure feeling in building that business. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. Like, the first one I sold through FE International because of that, because I didn't know anyone. I could have probably sent out an email or a Twitter tweet. I want to sell this thing. Give me your offers. But as you said, it's so scary. You are scary. You are scared to mess it up, and you're scared to have this once in a life opportunity to sell something valuable, and you might end up with somebody who tells you he's giving you a super high price and whatever, but in the end, it's just gonna go really sideways, and then you're having a lot of trouble. And this is why I worked with FE International in the beginning. And then on the second one, I already knew Kevin, and I knew he's a stand-up guy, and his word and virtual handshake, we didn't do the handshake really, right. is worth is, I don't know how to say it. It's worth
something. A lot.
A lot. And
I agree. Yeah, I have the same.
And it's a funny story. He's actually in Paris next week for on a personal trip, and we are planning to meet because we kind of kept the contact and became friends more or less, and that's just really nice. That you can keep those relationships over a long period of time and build up trust and all this kind of things, and then also have a good time as some dudes walking around in the city and talking about life. So that's pretty good.
I'm happy to hear that. I have the same relationship with Kevin. I mean, not exactly the same, obviously, but we still talk too. I actually, when this episode comes out, Kevin's episode will be the one before this, because I just talked to him last week, right? So we just chat all the time, and we even have like these official public conversations too, because we both have a lot that we want to share and talk about in public. And you're doing this now too. I'm really happy about this, which kind of brings me to my next thought. You're not very active on Twitter, at least not in the moment, but I see you sharing all this stuff right here, and you've written about it. You've obviously went on podcasts, and you are on podcasts. Are you kind of getting back into the kind of building in public game, into sharing your story? Is that what's happening, or is it just like a fluke right now?
It is no, let's say different. I made a break from it. Like I was much more active on Twitter up until, I don't know, maybe 1.5 years ago, 1 year ago, and there was no real reason or real event or whatever, a big decision. I just kind of, I don't know, posted less and less, and like felt like, I mean, this kind of stuff, you do need to, you either you want to do it or you don't want to do it, right?
Yeah.
If you don't want to do it, then there's no reason in doing it.
Yeah, that's right.
And but yeah, definitely a couple of weeks ago, I felt like, okay, why not go on podcasts again? That was always something I really enjoyed doing, because it's much deeper and much more, there's much more context in it. And so I got contacted by one guy from Germany. It's a German bootstrapper podcast, Happy Bootstrapping. As you are talking German, listen to it. Really nice guy. Yeah, I liked it. And then I thought, why not do it a little bit more? Because sharing is important, and it's not really, sure. I mean, sure, it's nice to be invited somewhere and then talk, and it's nice for the ego and whatever. But I wouldn't be where I am without all those blog posts, spending hours and hours on Hacker News back then, and indie hackers and Twitter. And this is basically the university. I mean, I did study stuff, but I studied other stuff.
Yeah, different things, right? Yeah.
And everything I did, I'm doing today, I basically learned through that. So I feel like it always sounds a little bit cheesy, but I feel like it's the right thing to share and give back. Yeah.
100%. That's why I'm here, and I guess it's also why you're here. So it's the perfect example. And I told you this in the beginning. If it wasn't for you, I don't know. I don't know what would have happened, because when Kevin reached out to us and we had shared like our MRR numbers, our Stripe numbers on Indie Hackers, we had kind of plugged that in. So he found us through Indie Hackers and then reached out to us through an email. I knew exactly who he was. And you did that. You did that for him. And you did that for me, right? You connected us without even knowing that you were connecting us in some future scenario. And I think that's what at least teaching in public, which is what you're currently doing here with me right today, that is what that can do on such a massive scale. And like prior to hitting the record button, we were talking about this, like the indie hacker scene has grown so much, right? Over the last couple of years. When you were in episode 24, it was still kind of a niche podcast. And now look at the Indie Hackers podcast and look at Startups for the Rest of Us, or other like podcasts in this space that have been going on for years, if not almost decades at this point. Isn't that wonderful? I don't know. I just want to be like share my gratitude for people like you who were there from the start and sharing their story. And I think it's important. So I can only recommend like doing more of this and also sharing more on Twitter, because I think you have a lot of pull. You have a lot of people following you, and you have a lot of interesting insights to share from running a business, I feel.
Yeah. And I feel like, I mean, there's always like, let's say like this, I'm really convinced like every journey is different. And when sometimes I'm doing mentoring sessions, and I had once this situation where I was telling somebody something, and then half a year later they told me, well, half a year later you told me that and it didn't work. And I was like, yeah, I don't know, like I just said stuff which worked for me. And I feel like you need to be really responsible in how you teach and how you share things. And again, I can just tell my story. I'm 100% sure that an indie hacker who's starting today has maybe more opportunities, but maybe it's also more difficult. I don't know. Like it's different, definitely.
Yeah,
and
it's different. Yeah, that's right.
So I think there's a very how to say it, like you need to be careful not to put yourself there as the guru. And I understood everything. And look at me, like with Refiner, it was the fourth product I was building, the fourth startup, and I was convinced I was having an easy time just executing whatever. And no, it didn't happen. And so yeah, teaching great, but for all people just starting out, be mindful about that every story is different. And when we both sold our company, it was a different time. And it sounds really like old dudes on the radio, but it's kind of true.
Yeah,
It
that's
was
right.
a different time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So, yeah.
and you're 100% right. Like all advice is anecdotal, like it's all just a story and experience that you have, and no advice is ever completely copyable in different circumstances. I 100% agree. And you're right. In a way, it's not even teaching, it's just sharing, right? It's just sharing a journey. It's just giving people just insights into what happened, why you think it happened, not why it happened, because you never really know, right? But why you have a strong sense that it happened for a reason, and then that's all you can do, and people have to pull from that what they want to learn. And I love this. That's why I've been asking you questions, not really for you to give me answers on how to do it, but more answers on how you did it. And I feel you're doing one other thing, and I kind of want to get back to this, because as myself, a coder as well, a technical person, and knowing that many people listening to this are engineers with, not too much patience for marketing or for sales, but they do want to build, they do want to make things. You're doing something with Refiner that's really cool, and you kind of make your documentation for your product kind of a first class citizen of the product. And I want to kind of ask you, like, how did that come to be? Why is that? And how do you keep this not just an add-on, but like a core part of your product?
Yeah, very interesting, because when I look back at the products I was building, they kind of reflect me as a person in the way that they are technical. My audience, the users who are using my products like Mailparser, DocParser, and Refiner, are at least tech-savvy people. They're not coders, but technical people who like that about the software, who like that they have lots of options to customize everything really the way they want to. And so the type of products building are, well, I don't want to say complex, because complex sounds difficult. I want them to be super easy,
Yeah, that's
but
right.
let's say they are powerful.
Yes.
And with that comes also options and customizations and all this kind of things. And I feel like if I would not have a really top-notch documentation, that wouldn't fit, right? That would feel weird in a way. And sometimes I witness that with products. They have a beautiful website, like really shiny, super nice, well-made website. You sign up, and then it's already a little bit not so beautiful, the software. And then you realize that it's super disappointing because there's not much functionality, or it's super complex or whatever. And I don't like this journey. I rather prefer having a good website, a good product, and a good documentation,
That'd be
and keep
great.
the
Yeah.
standard high. And so I felt like for the type of product I'm building and the audience I'm having, I'm it's my job to say, look, you can do a lot of stuff with this software. It's quite powerful. And I get it. It's maybe not obvious to you. It's obvious to me because I built that, but it's definitely not obvious to you because you are using it for the first time. Here's the documentation. I'm trying my best that it's good for you, which then makes my life easier as well, because I feel like with every user who's finding their answer in the documentation, I have one less email to
Yeah.
take care of.
Interesting. So it's kind of it is helping you reducing customer service load because people kind of help themselves. That does remind me. You were saying in the beginning that the thing you built that didn't go anywhere initially for Refiner was very like enterprisey sales heavy or focused at that. I guess now what you've been building is more of a low touch kind of SaaS. Do you
Yeah.
think? I know it's still both, and that is an
Yeah.
interesting thing. I would like to know how you bridge this, like how you build a business that is both low touch SaaS ish and high touch sales. But what I'm also interested in, as we are still at documentation, do you think like having a good documentation is actually a beneficial part of your sales process, both in low touch and in high touch? Like how does it fit into this kind of dichotomy of sales?
Yeah, so really a lot of good points in there. So when I started out, I started it as a product for startups, starting at $39 per month, and I over the time, and it's so obvious once you know it, once you see it, it's so obvious. But then I didn't see it. Over time, I realized actually companies who are getting the most value out of my product are bigger. They're not early stage startups, because to get value out of surveys, you need to have either a lot of users, and I'm talking like thousands and not hundreds. Or you have a team which is so big that like opinions or gut feeling is not counting that much anymore. So basically, you're having a you think like like early stage founders are often driven by gut feeling and talking with the users, and then it's like less about really like hard numbers. And this works really well, and I'm still doing this. Like I'm still at that point. But once you're becoming a bigger company, then you want to have some proof before you start the machine of implementing something. And this is when surveys can really give you a lot of peace of mind, actually. And so I realized that the best customers, in the sense of they are getting the most value out of it, are more like established startups with attraction, or even scale ups, or B2C marketplaces, all these kind of software companies. And with this realization came also going with the prices up. And so today the small price starts at 79 if you pay yearly, but more like 99 if you pay monthly. And I mean, there are customers paying more than 1,000 per month. Like it's really like a spend, which is I would call maybe not already mid-market, but yeah, definitely not indie hackers, no, and no early stage startups, or just some of them. And with this knowledge came also the realization that on the upper end, they cannot go self-service. They cannot go low touch. I mean, even if they tell me, oh, look, I created an account, I understand the software, I know what to do, they still need to go through legal. They still need to pay invoices on a yearly basis. They still want to have a signature on the terms of service. They still want to have a security audit, and so on and so on. So even if my user, the one who is signing up, would like just to put in his credit card and be done with it, they can't, because they're in a bigger company where they have other processes. And this is where my colleague Flori comes in, where she's basically, for these kind of customers, some kind of project manager, driving the project forward, following up, talking with different stakeholders, and so on and so on. This is why I'm having this dual model. If it was up to me, let's do low touch, right? I mean, but there's just this reality. If you sell to banks or whatever, that's not how it works, right? So yeah, and this is why you can do both. And sometimes people are like, oh, I need to decide whether low touch or sales driven, and I feel like all of it. There are customers like this, and there are customers like that. And some people like to try it. Some people like to talk. Some people like to whatever. And then if you want to grow your business, then do all of it, right?
Mm-hmm. Do you see a tendency? Like, do you see a move more towards enterprise over time, or like a shift somewhere?
Right now, it's quite stable, actually. Like, I feel like would need to look it up. I would say 1/3 are custom contracts, custom pricing. 2/3 is credit card, as is, like self-service.
I think like that immediately makes me think of the technical implementation of that kind of pricing structure. I don't want to dive into it too much, but I'm thinking, if this is what can happen to a business, it makes a lot of sense to think of your pricing structure when you start building your business as something very flexible, right? Like, how did you think about this? Like, how did you build that?
Yeah, there was actually one pivotal point. Pivotal, I don't know how to say it, but
pivotal, I think. Yeah.
Pivotal, exactly. In the beginning, I was charging based on survey responses. The more survey responses you collect per month, the more you pay me. Didn't work out, because there were huge companies which were synchronizing all their user data to me. So I was like crunching a lot of user data just to have like 50 responses, because they just wanted to survey a really tiny segment of the user base. So I switched the model to what I call what is called commonly called monthly active users. So the more users you are having, the more data you're synchronizing with my app, the more you need to pay, which is kind of a better proxy for how much value you are actually also getting out of the software. And this kind of stuff is baked into the code in a way that I have an admin backend where I can for each account say this is their quota. Then and also I have feature flags. For example, they can access the translation feature. They can do this and this and this. And the way technically it is done is like somebody on a normal plan, on the essentials or growth plan, will have by default all the settings as written in my config file, but I can go in and override them. And then there's this one special plan, which is called the enterprise plan. And there it's basically the default settings are really generous. And I can still also go in and override for every account the thing. And then on the billing side, I'm using ChargeBee, which then also allows me to set for every customer on the enterprise plan a custom amount. And so, and this is where you see comes also this, about what I mentioned before, that I'm dealing with invoices and stuff all day long. And the downside is really like the bigger customers. It's so nice if you have suddenly like $500 MRR on top because there's this one new customer. But this customer needs to have a new invoice in 1 year. So you need to have a reminder in 1 year, you're going to send it, and you need to send it a couple of weeks before because they takes them some time. And so, yeah, there comes the ops complexity with it.
Well, I guess it's worth it, right? That's kind of what I'm hearing. Like with these big customers, they are value metric is pretty scalable. I do wonder how much does this cost to run? Because if you ingest all this data, you kind of have to have some kind of cloud hosting and all that. Is that manageable? Like, how do you manage? How do you keep that cost down?
It is an issue, right? Yeah. So my approach in the past was always, as a tiny team, I'm happy to pay more to AWS for managed services, a managed database, managed queuing, all the, the SQS, the S3, the RDS. It's such a relief. It's just running. And well, there's a price to it. And the price is now becoming so big that I could actually basically hire somebody, maybe not full time, but I could definitely spend some money on somebody who can help me putting all this on bare metal and let it run for, I don't know, maybe 1/10 of the cost.
Oh, yeah.
Because right now I'm at the point where I'm between 15 and 20% of the MRR, which goes straight to AWS. And I know that in the past it was more like, for my other businesses, like 5 to 10, which I don't know if there's a benchmark out there, but I know there are lots of very, very successful businesses which are paying a couple of $100 per month. So yeah, the cost for me right now is like really it's definitely a topic. And with 20% of your MRR going straight to the hosting provider, it's painful.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That is expensive. It does remind me of what we did with Feedback Panda, because we did hosted database, like managed database stuff as well. I think we paid, like, when we sold, we had 55,000 in MRR, and I think at least 5,000 of that was an expense just purely to, I think Mongo HQ was the name of it. Compose was the later name, bought by IBM at some point. It's just for a database, which didn't even have.
That's 10% of your MRR.
10%, but that was almost the only expense we had, so we were good. But it still is substantial. It's substantial, and you are right. At that point, if you pay $5,000 a month for something that would cost you maybe a couple hundred in like the technical expenses, you could pay the remaining 4,500 to a person to be there all the time and dealing with it. It's just, I always, in my own mind, I always thought I'm paying 5,000 to Compose because they have a team of 20 people that if something goes down, it's up again because they're working in shifts. If there is like a 0-day exploit somewhere, they immediately patch the system. If a server explodes, or wasn't that like I don't know if it was in France or something recently where there was this flooding in a data center. Like if that happens, somebody's swimming to my server and making sure it's still running. That's kind of what you pay for at that moment. But
it's exactly the approach that I had. Like whatever I can in the hosting side give to a managed service, And I would recommend it actually. Like I would definitely not recommend trying to save $100 in the beginning and then run your own database server and risk your business because
Yeah.
maybe you misconfigured it and your
Yeah.
database is gone, right? I mean,
That's risky. Yeah.
that's a major risk. And yeah, but as I said before, like right now I'm coming to a point where I feel like something should be done about that.
Yeah.
Too expensive.
You're right though. Like it's not just misconfiguring and then it's kind of gone because it implodes, but also somebody might just really get access to all your customer data, right? So and the more you move into your kind of compliance level enterprise sales, the more you have to be absolutely clear that the thing you checked on their checkbox is actually protected, right?
Yes,
So
yes,
for the
yes.
audit.
That's another really big point. For example, in the GDPR world, we are hosting in Europe because of that. And AWS allows us to do that. Security wise, the data is encrypted in transit and also at rest. This kind of stuff, like, yeah, you can do all this, but I am not a DevOps engineer. And these guys are super expensive. And yeah, as you said, you're not getting this level of reliability yourself, and this is why I'm kind of continuing it with it. And it's already 1 year that I'm saying I need to reduce the cost, but
Well, you'll find the right time for that. Kind of brings me to kind of the final question. What are your future plans for Refiner? Where is this going? What do you plan for the next couple of years, or do you even have plans? I'd like to know.
it's a really good question. So, like on the product side, there are a couple of things I could do because like with Refiner, I'm basically in the product. Let it be a web app or a mobile app where I'm displaying inside the app survey. And a couple of other tools exist. They are like onboarding tool tips or checklists or whatever. You can do a lot of action stuff inside an app. So I could branch out there. There's another opportunity where I could branch out more into the data crunching and maybe add a layer of that you can also send me product usage data. Then I could do stuff like, look, power users are more satisfied than no power users. And I mean, we can do that already today with the integrations, and our customers are doing that, but I could build that into my product. So there's lots of stuff I could do. And at the same time, I'm feeling like, well, maybe Refiner is just this pro tool thing, this very, very specific tool, which allows you to do the best possible in-app survey experience. And it's fine like that. Like I'm not really, I didn't decide on that right now. And in terms of the company, like what I would like to do is definitely hire support and customer success people so that this is off my chest. Like, because, like being an indie founder or like a solo founder, and everybody knows it, right? There's so much freedom. There's so much good parts about it. But one of this huge downside is you are responsible all the time. And
Yeah, that's right.
I can right now, like when I go on vacation, I can put it down to like 15 to 30 minutes per day on the good days. And so I need to check emails in the morning. And I'm telling myself, well, that's fine. That's a good price to pay for all the freedom which comes along. But I think one of the goals would be to be at the point where the team is like really bulletproof, and I can say if I don't get an SMS or phone call, I consider everything is going fine.
Nice.
That would be the goal.
Yeah, that sounds like the perfect. It kind of reminds me of what John Warrior was saying in Built to Sell. Like the perfect sellable business is a business that can run without you, where you remove yourself from operations. So that's kind of almost the logical follow up question is like, are you thinking about eventually exiting that business? Is it going to be sold one day? What do you think?
You
never know.
You never know.
Well,
Right now it's not a good time. I think right
yeah,
now it's not the right time for several reasons. I think no, actually not for several reasons. It's just not at the point where I would like to let it go. There's really like just so much stuff I can still do, I want to do. But yeah, let's talk in 5 years again.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think that's the mentality that indie hackers just develop at some point, right? We will see. We'll see.
Yeah.
Not now, maybe. Depends on the offer, right? It's always a combination of that.
And what you just mentioned, right? I don't know who said it, like maybe it was also Kevin. A business that is easy to run is a business which is easy to sell. Like basically what you just said before, like in a little different words. And it's kind of should be, I mean, there are times where you're pushing, times where you're giving all you have to make it grow as fast as possible. And I feel like the next step for Refiner might be this. Well, it's a marathon. Let's
Yeah,
try to cool things down, and then
that's right.
everything can happen, right?
Yeah,
Then I can run it for 10 more years because it's
yeah,
calm,
exactly.
or I can sell
That's
it, whatever.
I love the idea of like calming it down, because once you're calm, you see more things. Like you're not in this kind of chaotic panic mode because every fire needs to be doused immediately, right? But you kind of, okay, now this is the way I could go, or let's just slightly move over here. I think that is exactly right. I'm super pumped to just follow your journey along. And I certainly hope you're going to be more active on Twitter. I'm
Yeah.
going to try and follow you on every podcast you go at any point, obviously, but I would love to see you share more of this, because I think that a journey of a business that had to pivot like 18 months in and is now profitable and growing and finding enterprise customers, that is a story that is super successful compared to many other people's stories, even though you might feel like you're still in the middle of it. But just look at it from somebody who has nothing, right? This is a glowing example of how it could look like. And it's something that I just want to see these little steps that you take off. I want to see, what are you trying here? Are you branching out to, your tooltip kind of onboarding thing, or are you actually focusing on just being the product that does this? This is exciting for me to just follow along the journey. So I would love for you to do this. And that brings me to my last question. Where can people find more about you, and where can they follow that journey that I just promised them you will take them on?
So as I'm now restarting to be active on social media, Twitter is the best place, definitely.
Yeah.
Like I feel like it's for me still the place where I can most easily and most freely just speak my mind about the business. And like also Twitter is for me like pure business. I'm not sharing personal stuff there.
Mhm.
So yeah, please go to Twitter, M Dausinger. I guess you're gonna link that up.
Yeah, I
And
will.
I promise I will be more active there.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but I would love to see it, because I think the community can benefit so much from you. I think they already have. I certainly have. And again, to bring this to a close, thank you so much for everything you have done over the last 6 years in being there for people, sharing your story, sharing your knowledge, and for hopefully keeping at it and keeping sharing your story. Moritz, that was a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
My pleasure, and really mean it. And thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Thank you. And that's it for today. Thank you for listening to The Bootstrap Founder. You can find me on Twitter, if Twitter is still there, at Arvidkahl, ARVIDKAHL. You find my books and my Twitter course there as well. And if you want to support me and the show, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, get this podcast in your podcast player of choice, and leave a rating and a review by going to ratethispodcast.com/founder. Any of this will really, really help the show. Thank you very much for listening, and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.